All right, so we may have a few people come in a little bit later, but we've got the sign-in sheet going around. Feel free to put your email on there. I'll send you a PDF copy of my book as a thank you for coming here today. Yeah, absolutely. It's not too bad of a read. It's only 19 pages and it's got pictures, so it should be pretty easy to get through. But it's a prompted journal style, so it'll ask questions and point you in directions, and then you do your exploration. It's the first in a series, probably at least 3 of them. First one, the one that you'll be receiving, is Being Humans, which is the name of the heading of all the things that I do, is Being Humans, capital B-E. And this one's the Explorer's Journal. The second in the series will be the Being Humans Operator's Manual, and the third one right now is Being Humans Complete Field Guide. So, yeah, and it encourages people like this. This emotional ThinkTank encourages people to be whoever they are and embrace that and share that, because one of the many things that I'm working on simultaneously with all the other fun stuff is an abundance economy. So getting people in an idea, concept that they are abundant and they have important and valuable things to share. So a little bit about me is that what year is it? 2014?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm 32. I was a civil engineering inspector for over 10 years. I've invested, by now it's about $100,000 in personal self-development. All 4 of my clairsenses have been active since birth. So I see auras and entities and interact with other dimensions and other fun stuff like that. I created karmic processing. It's a very valuable tool for working through different energies and life lessons so that you can move along and have that energy back to do things you want to do. And I also assisted in getting an energy awareness campaign in over 300 schools, so it's actually going to be part of the supplemental curriculum for regular public schools.
What is it?
It's the Ship Before You Create program. It's with the Anti-Bullying Coalition. So the gal that actually passed the legislation, I'm connected with her, and then she's actually been the go-between for the entire program to the schools. So that's something that we are really looking forward to actually starting this year. We've been in 2 schools so far and have done over 100,000, walked 100,000 people through the process. But you know, with kids it's especially useful because before life and has the challenges that it presents, they have the tools to manage it. So it's been very, not only a valuable tool for me to learn, but also just giving these kids the tools. Frederick Douglass had quite a bit to say, and I forget the quote, so it was awesome. This is actually season 2, episode 1 of Emotional Think Tanks, and we'll get into the physics and metaphysics.
Yes, okay.
We'll get into the physics and metaphysics you're seeing here in a little bit. But the biggest thing that I teach people is I'm amazing, you're amazing, and so it isn't about all the amazing cool things. Down there on the bottom, dude, there's a little minus button. Ta-da! So this isn't about me. This is a facilitated forum. I'm here to kind of set the ground rules and keep us moving in the right direction. But your contributions are just as valuable as mine, and that's the energy that I want to create. So to start off with, we want to set some ground rules so that we can be in a space of open sharing, vulnerability when we choose. But these allow us to explore regions of ourselves and our thoughts and emotions that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. So the first rule is to manage your communication devices. So if you have your phone on you, turn it off or on the silent, because you want to be present. And being present allows you to observe whatever aspect of self or anything else that you get to. The second rule is that you agree to respect everyone in this space. And respecting someone looks like allowing them to have their time to speak and come up with whatever words they choose to come up with and express their emotions or interests or ideas in whatever way they choose. You can have your own opinions, but you're respecting them enough to let them voice where they're coming from. And we do encourage conflict of opinions and different points of view, because that's what this is all about. Is physics and metaphysics are something, they're often seen as opposites. So what we're doing is finding the middle ground. So we have common language after this. So let's just go around, just a brief, who are you, name, and so that people know who you are, and then we'll just go around.
My name's Brian. I'm affiliated with Sacred City, and I'm a dude into a lot of different things. What's happening?
I'm Katie.
Okay. And what do you do? Or who are you?
What do I do? I go to school right now.
Okay, so you're a student.
Student.
Okay.
I want to know what you're studying.
Social work.
Cool. Good. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Elizabeth, aka Elise. I am. Yeah, I am.
So, just a little bit, we had a class before, so people are kind of familiar with you. But just kind of who are you statement?
That's such a hard question to answer, truly. I am really happy to be a part of this community here at SUZ. I feel home, which is a really big deal for me. Really big deal. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm an individual. I love the color orange.
Nice.
I'll stop there.
Okay. And see how we had all different ways of expressing ourselves and different levels of comfort in sharing and different collections of thoughts. And that's what this is about. It isn't about, okay, everybody do it Brian's way now or my way. Who are you? How do you express yourself? What do you have to share with the group? What do you think?
I'm Kizzy, real name Saber. Nobody calls me that. I am just my happy place, which is Restaurant Facebook and Metaphysics. And I am just trying to figure it out.
Cool. Awesome.
It's fun, it's interesting.
Yeah. And
Open.
the key of this is that it's sanctuary. So however you choose to share, express yourself. If you choose not to express yourself, that's a way of expressing not the space to share. So we won't be pushed or goaded into it. We just want to move things along so that we have a concept and we have ways of approaching it, and then we actually have actionable steps afterwards. So all this is well and good, and hey, I feel good, but what do I do with this? How do I create from this space? So that's what we're going for here. So physics, I typically see it as the observed rules of physical reality. So physical rules for short. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Well, physics is often there's physics that is based on observation, and then there's theoretical physics, which is more mathematical nature, and nobody really agrees necessarily on what's true in physics right now.
Okay.
Maybe some people do, but
it's math and it's theory. Sometimes the letters come in different order. Anything else? You all pretty good with that definition for physics? Cool. So, metaphysics, I simplify as the observed rules of non-physical reality. Anybody have anything else to add to that? Or contradictions. I'm open to those too.
But ultimately, metaphysical phenomena, insofar as you're talking about anything that exists outside of emptiness, is something observable, potentially measurable.
Yeah.
And so drawing a distinction is useful, but also somewhat contradictory.
Yeah.
Okay? But yeah.
See ya. Okay, so and the reason that I draw this dichotomy is so that we can see the differences between the two. Because that's not necessarily people in this room, but that's where a lot of people outside this room are focused, is the differences. Black and white, male and female,
Spirit
long
and
and
matter.
light. Yeah. So the duality, the opposites, are a big aspect of who people see themselves. I am this, I'm not this. Inside, outside, kind of thing. So the basics in physics of how we see it, that's what we're working on today, is seeing, is basically light reflects, and we see colors, we see shapes. Based on the movement of the light, we see speed and distance and all these other things. We do all these different calculations based on observations that we make. Essentially,
The light that our senses filter light that's bouncing off of objects.
exactly. So, for instance, what color is her shirt?
It's black.
But is it black?
No.
Okay. So, pretend that this is the right light switch, and then also pretend that this is, it's dark in here. Can you tell what color her shirt is when it's dark in here?
Well, yeah, I get the point.
Okay. Does everybody know?
So it's context dependent.
Yeah. Well, the simple phrase that I came up with is no light, no sight.
Right.
Is essentially how the physics aspect works, because it says that what is reflected back to us is what we see. But what's true about your shirt is that it's actually reflecting no light and absorbing all light. If it's a true black, it's absorbing all this light. So it's not reflecting anything black or back to us, so we see it as black. Versus white or gray or somewhere in between, different levels of light is reflected and absorbed. So it kind of puts you in a different space when you realize that the colors you're seeing aren't the colors that the object is, just the color of the light that it's reflecting back to you. It's kind of fun.
And it's a useful exercise because you start to draw this distinction between an object and its essence, and how those two are really related, but can have different qualities.
Right. Yeah, so you can already see how physics and metaphysics are related, because what we can observe and quantify is here. What we can't necessarily observe or quantify is over there. And it's a natural state of who we are, because we're experiencing physicality. We're also experiencing spirit and soul and essence and life. Life is a grand and not necessarily easily defined thing, and we're experiencing that as well. So we've got this dichotomy, this duality that we experience. So the way that we actually see the things around us is refraction. Our eye takes in the light that's coming into it and actually bends it. Air itself actually bends the light, but the way that we see is we bring that light in and we refract it and actually focus it to a point and make an image out of it. And actually it flips around in the eye, so our eye is actually seeing it upside down and our brain does the math and flips it back right side up. So that focus, refraction, color, these are all aspects of how we see physically. The brief anatomy of the eyeballs, you've got the cornea, the pupil, the lens, the retina, the brain, so it comes in through the cornea, and then it enters through the pupil, and the pupil dilates depending on the ambient light conditions. The lens then focuses it, refracts it, it hits the retina on the back of the eye, and then that message sent to the brain. Real basic rundown. And then the brain interprets those visual impulses, it categorizes them, sorts them, and sends feedback to the body. If all we're doing is observing, then there isn't any response. It's just, this is what's going on around us. But if we're moving and driving or texting or doing whatever we're doing, then we have another response outside of that. But that gets into interpretation and the rest of that. What we're just focusing on right now is seeing. So on the physical aspect of seeing, in the physics side of things, are there any questions so far? Pretty straightforward, learn some new stuff. Cool. So I only have notes for the physical stuff. The metaphysical stuff just tends to flow for me pretty naturally. Left brain versus right brain, or however you choose to observe it. So on the metaphysics side of things, one of the key things that comes up is Toltec wisdom, Toltec philosophy. And the Toltecs believe in seeing versus looking. And the seeing is kind of like a third eye sensation in some cases. But other Toltecs see by dancing, so kinesthetically. Others see by smelling. Others see by feeling. Yeah, the clairsentience. So you've got the four main clairs, which is claircognizance, clairthinking, clairsentience, clairfeeling, clairaudience, clairhearing, and clairvoyance, with the most popular one, clairseeing. So you have these different clairs that are interacting and giving you information. But that's, again, just one way of interpreting the reality that comes through. So the key difference between seeing and in Toltec philosophy, that physics would be looking. So that would be the difference between is the physical act. And in looking, you're not even comprehending the information that's coming to you. You're just seeing it. You're just, as we would commonly use the word seeing, but you're just looking at it. You're not interacting with it. You're not really understanding the message that's there. So with the metaphysics of seeing, it gets into discernment and really choosing that this information that I'm receiving is true and accurate, and I understand it as it's coming in, and I'm interacting with it as it's coming in. It's a very dynamic way of existing. This is really useful because a lot of times when we get into the physics, it literally becomes black and white. You know, like your shirt. Your shirt is absorbing every spectrum of light, which would be white as we would observe it. And as such, it looks black. So it's a dichotomy. It's the duality. It's the yin yang. That it is this or it is this. There's no in between. But in essence and truth, there's all sorts of gray. I wore this shirt tonight for a reason. There's all different shades of gray. There's 50 shades, you know, if you listen to Sasha Grey. But there's all these varying shades of awareness and shades of interaction that are conditioning our reality. And that's really what the metaphysics of seeing is about. So, on the metaphysics side of seeing, are there any questions, comments, anything to add to that?
Well, I think metaphysics to me is about feeling. You know, it's the soul element, which is usually when we're kind of talking about things like compassion or love or peace or whatever, or anger. I put that in the metaphysical category because maybe it could be physically observed. I know that physiologically there's a connection between your feelings and your body and the vibration. And certainly I feel like I can pick up on people's energy when I'm around them, especially if they're feeling something strongly. I don't know if you guys feel that, but I feel like there's an actual wave that is propagating, and I'm experiencing that, and then maybe reflecting back some feelings based on whether I like that feeling or I don't like that feeling or whatever. And so it feels like it's a physical thing, but in terms, if you were to go talk to a physicist, they'd say, "Well, you're crazy. There isn't any of that going on, but you may feel that way." So yeah, I just think metaphysics is about feeling and just kind of, something like, in physics they teach about things like duality, right? Electrons and protons and negative charge versus positive charge and things like that. But they don't teach you things like what is a mirror in your relationships with other people. Why do you judge somebody? Well, it's because either they're exactly like you and you dislike that part of yourself, or they're the opposite of you or whatever.
And you dislike that because it's not who you are.
Right. But so you can tell metaphysically through the emotional experience that there's some pattern. There's a structure to the universe. There's an order to it. But good luck trying to find a mathematical theorem or anything that supports that.
Right. Cool. Thank you. That was awesome. Anybody else have a contribution, insight? Okay. Agreed? Awesome. So it's fun that you ended where you did, because in fact there is science to support exactly what you're talking about.
Alternative science.
Alternative, but actually practiced and demonstrated physical experiments. Okay. So this is the beauty, because a lot of people are in that mindset that, well, it's not identified as real science by the scientists, or it's alternative science. So it's awesome that you bring that in, because that is a mentality. And in fact, I get kind of the vibe that at least 3 of you haven't heard about the quantum probability matrix.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So this is a fun thing, because it was a theory, as a lot of these physics aspects are classified as metaphysics. It's a theory, it's a thought. In the metaphysics side, shamans and priests and monks and whoever else has been seeing these geometric patterns, these mandalas, these different things come out when they do their meditations, when they resonate these different tonal frequencies. They see these vibrations
manifest as geometric forms.
Exactly. Colors, kaleidoscopes, whatever they show up as. So cymatics is a really cool branch of science that goes into how sound waves organize matter. It's a pretty simple experiment. You have a speaker and a tone modulator, like a computer or whatever, and you put a plate on the speaker, and then you put salt or something else on that speaker plate, and then as the tone shifts and change, the formations actually change. So if you want to find cymatics, it's CYMATCI or TICS. told you sometimes the letters get switched. And it's a really powerful thing. But in and of itself, it's kind of like, hey, that's cool, but what's it actually mean? Well, my exploration of that and what's it actually mean and how can I apply this led me to find the quantum probability matrix. So the science of it is they were looking for absolute zero. Absolute zero was the theoretical point at which all cellular movement stops. So all this molecular movement that's happening within us at all times, they're like, well, as it gets colder, it gets slower. So there's some time that it gets cold enough that it'll slow to a stop. So they theorized and actually projected mathematically based on their observations when that would be. 273 Kelvin. So Kelvin is a temperature scale that doesn't really focus on freezing of water. It focuses more on the molecular interactions. So it goes on a different scale. But essentially, negative 273 Kelvin is, I think it's like negative 640 something. I don't have the math readily available. But anyway, it's colder than anywhere you would find on Earth. And the vacuum of space is actually just barely above this temperature. Right? Yeah, so this vacuum of space is just barely above this temperature. And they've got all these different associations, dark matter, and yada, yada, yada. And a lot of that is old science. If you want to do more research on this, a guy that really just presents it in a very beautifully flowing, artistic, and even metaphysical way is Nassim Haramein.
Right.
And that's Nassim Heramein, something like but he presents the physics in a very clear and understandable aspect.
Right.
At any rate, once the scientists finally got it cold enough, and it took a lot to get things cold enough, they had to do a vacuum and a centrifuge and remove all this excess energy that was in the space, because things don't want to get that cold. It's alive. It wants to be alive.
Anything that moves generates heat.
Exactly. So they had to slow it down and suspend it and do all these different things. So they got really close, and then they finally got to absolute zero. And when they got there, what they found was that these atoms were in a suspended matrix. An interwoven matrix that's the basic fundamental foundation. Yeah, it's the flower of life, but it's also, we had the movie, The Matrix. We had all this other stuff, and that's been in the consciousness for a while. So this quantum probability matrix actually proved the metaphysics.
Right.
So the quantum probability matrix brings to light and really clarifies some of the stuff that the leaders in not only the theoretical physics, but also the experimental physics. It puts a light on all the things that they've been telling us. They're like, oh, it's really easy, it's just this. And the spiritual teachers have been saying the same thing. Oh, it's really easy, it's just this. But the quantum problem? Nice. The quantum probability matrix, hold on, give me a second. There we go. It said that here's the fundamental underlying structure of everything. Cool, we've been looking for that for as long as humanity's been around. It proved to the physical people that it existed, the gurus and whatever knew that it existed, but didn't have the physical evidence that these folks were looking for. So it proved that it existed. But furthermore,
United metaphysics and physics.
Exactly. Folks like Einstein, Tesla, you know, the various explorers of the physics fields have been talking about vibration and frequency, and the hippies were talking about vibration and frequency. And it seemed like it was two different things. Oh, I don't like that guy's vibe. You know, the vibration is the oscillation.
Their culture, their value judgments were distorting their logical reasoning.
But going in two completely opposite directions, they found the same thing.
Right.
And by finding the same
Which
thing,
fits into metaphysical theory.
Exactly.
You know, that you'll go to two extremes,
Yep.
and eventually they become the same.
Yep.
You know.
yeah, and it was beautiful because that separation had created more and more and more separation. And then they started to find out the same things. They started to identify the same things. So not this weekend, but next Saturday, I'm actually doing Sound Healer Summit. What I've chosen to represent that is Nikola Tesla, because I'm doing a vibrational medicine workshop. Nikola Tesla said that if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So I'm like, well, that's a really cool quote, and it feels right, but what does it mean? So I looked up the words energy, frequency, and vibration. And it's talking about a point of equilibrium. So vibration is determined by an oscillation around a point of equilibrium. Well, a point of equilibrium is based on observation that is staying still.
So you have that dualism between stability or stasis, or nothing, and something.
Exactly.
Or movement, non-movement.
Yeah. So, and then frequency. Well, that's the modulation of vibration. So things are getting a whole lot simpler. Well, and then energy. So Einstein, when he was talking to people about all these really cool things that he was seeing and experiencing and theorizing based on his complex observation of the universe around him, energy is a word he actually invented because he had to come up with something to define this intangible thing. So energy came up. Energy in physics is actually determined based on the ability to heat things, which goes back to vibration, which brings us back to the secrets of the universe. So essentially what's going on, and this kind of goes beyond the scope of seeing, but ties in as well, is
it's
quantum
consciousness, and consciousness is subtle side, so it's good.
Yeah. So the quantum probability matrix determines reality based on its vibrational frequency. And it's just that simple. So the reason that you are you, and you are you, and you are you, and I am me, and we identify each other as human most of the time, and these different things is the vibrational frequencies at which this stuff that's making us all up, which science says quantum probability matrix, others would say source material or love or whatever. This is their name in science for it. Is saying the same thing as the metaphysics folks have been saying for years.
Right.
So this is awesome, but how do we use it? Right now, do all of you feel comfortable talking to people about the quantum probability matrix?
I love talking about this stuff, but it's a generally limited pool of either metaphysical people that don't like the detail or dogmatic, scientific types that, can oftentimes be emotionally upset by the implications of some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee?
I get the general idea of it.
Right.
But, not going into too much detail.
Right.
But I have to understand and relate to it.
Is somebody in the door? Or is it just something?
It's just
Okay. Cool. So it's something that you could talk about. You wouldn't go into a lot of detail, but it's kind of cool, right? To see, you know, people like, oh, scientists, physicists, I don't get it, or muggles, or, you know, whatever label people put on the people that they feel are completely different than they are. But these two very different groups, by being exactly who they were and going in completely opposite directions, found the same thing. And now there's common language for them to go between and actually have these communications. So a big part of the emotional think tank is giving you tools for communication. Because while I'm super jazzed about the quantum probability matrix and how it tangentializes the universe and life essence and makes us who we are, maybe that's not what you're excited about.
But some people get off on like love and, you know, whatever.
Exactly.
The same shit,
stuff,
but it's
different name.
Yeah.
And rose by any other name.
Yeah.
So these are opportunities for us to share and grow. And what are you really passionate about? And that's what this whole thing is about. What are you really passionate about? And how can people use it? And this is what I teach people. This is what my book's about. This is all the energy that I'm cultivating. Because I found out how amazing I was. People were telling me all the time, I didn't believe them, and I told them they were wrong. And then I was like, maybe. And I tried out being amazing, and it worked out pretty good. So I kept doing it.
It helps you resolve conflict within your being.
Big time. And when I'm calm and centered, the world around me is calm and centered, regardless of what's going on. Fire trucks and homeless peoples and pimps and all this other stuff going on, I can still see the love in it. I can still see the connection and how it's perfect and why it came into my space at the time it did and what can I learn from it. I mean, any experience, conversation between you and I, a simple word exchange, a picture, anything can be expressed with passion and purpose and connection if you so choose. And that is the energy, the flow that I'm working to bring into people's awareness. So how about you? Does quantum probability matrix, does it make sense? Can you talk to people about it? Is there more you want?
Well, I enjoyed listening and learning about it. I don't know if I would go into the conversation, but I really enjoyed learning.
Well, and the fun part is that you don't have to have an intellectualized, in-depth conversation if that's not where you're comfortable at. Me, I love being in both because I love seeing how opposite they seem.
I think you have to be willing to do both because
Exactly.
that's what wholeness is if you don't like the kind of this sort of stuff, you should look at that and be like, why don't I like it? Was I told I was stupid? You know, am I incurious generally? And you know, whatever, because I think if individually you know the blessing that comes from integrating these aspects of being, and as a society, if we can move towards that, all of our problems will be solved.
Yeah. Well, and I really, not just like beauty pageant, beauty queen thing. World peace, I want world peace. I really believe that some form of that can exist in my lifetime, based on the progress that I'm seeing already. So, how though? I've got this awesome, amazing plan and goal and vision. How do I make it happen? Well, a simple dichotomy like this, and exploring both sides and then finding what goes in between the two, is how stuff like that happens.
It stimulates creative problem solving.
Exactly. And this
you
is
understand the laws of the universe, physical and metaphysical.
Well, and this is why I present emotional think tanks in the way that I do. Because your emotional or metaphysical side is just as important and valuable as your physical or logical or whatever you do the dichotomy. Your own split is going to be unique because you are unique.
Yeah.
But I present this so that people can apply this concept in their lives. So before we get into like how we can do the practical application of this, instead of talking and changing that way, I'd like to do just a visual demonstration of seeing. And this is in the book. Where is it? Yes, it's in the book. It'll be in subsequent ones, and there's and expansion of it. But let's pull this over here. So, and I jerry-rigged this setup so that I could present tonight based on what I had available. But again, that's kind of my philosophy for any kind of presentation. I could have presented tonight with just what's on my shirt and on my necklace. I could have done it just as easy because I trust myself and I trust the content, I trust my ability to read the energy of the room. We didn't spend as much time on physics because that's not where you guys wanted it to be. You really wanted to be there, but
kind of.
yeah, but it
I
was a
only care
little
about that shit so that, like, the people, the scientific elites or whatever, will kind of, let go of their dogma and we can move into a more beautiful planet.
Yeah.
So personally, I don't even talk about any of the complexity.
well,
But I know that it matters in terms of how we operate in the world, and I'm impacted by the belief systems of the majority to some degree.
right, yeah,
I thought, like, on both sides and knowing both sides. And there's some people that are more like the scientists or whatever, but really there's wholeness in the situation by having both. Like,
absolutely.
there's really a wholeness of understanding whatever it is by being in two things.
Yeah. Well, and we all know what the yin yang looks like, right? You've got the mostly black side with the white dot. You've got the mostly white side with the black dot. That points to a larger lesson that within this surrounding darkness, there's light. Within this surrounding light, there's dark. And that's how we've chosen to experience reality. Until we don't, but it's another topic.
And the two are basically, they're both each other. It's not like they're just opposites. They're like binary fractals. So it's like, so white contains black within it. Every male contains female. Every female contains male. In addition to the fact that male and female are supposedly separate.
Yeah.
So it's fractalized, that division.
Well, and that became very clear to me in it was kind of like a waking dream, vision, however you want to flavor it. But I saw the yin yang symbol as a fountain. And on the fountain there was the white energy going, and as it was exposed, it turned to the black energy. And the black energy, as it was exposed to the white energy. And the really fun part was that the fountain wasn't split physically. There was no split. It was flowing naturally, and it all came from the same source, which was awesome and totally in line with everything else that I learned and experienced up to that point. But that visualization was very empowering because it was, it's flowing and it's moving and it's dynamic. It isn't fixed. It's coming from the same source. All this other stuff lined up. And as I seek, so shall I find. So these things came into my space as I was looking for them. So that was cool. So one of the things that I use as a visualization is a cube. So how many sides does a cube have? 6. Everybody agree with that? Can we observe that there are 6 sides on this cube?
Not from my vantage point.
That's an excellent point.
But my imagination,
right? So
knows.
How do you know that a cube has 6 sides?
I can imagine the object and through reasoning deduce the number of sides it has without reference to any knowledge I learned in school.
How?
By imagining it. Okay. So if I imagine the cube, then I can, using my imagination, count each side because there's a logical structure that emerges from the cube. Now the question would become, if I'd never seen a cube, could I imagine it? And the answer is that me personally on an ego level, no, because that's how we learn. But if I went into universal consciousness, then I would become the geometries, and I've had that experience. All wisdom contained within them, which is all wisdom. the world, and all numerical combinations and probabilities are there. So I think you can know anything just by becoming it.
Right. Well, who told you what a cube looks like?
I think the first time I probably learned about a cube was in school.
Exactly. So, in school, is that where everybody else learned about a cube?
Yeah.
In some form or another, right? So in school, you were told, this is a cube, and here's how you define it. So, how do you define a cube? What are some of the school rules for a cube?
A cube is a six-sided, three-dimensional polygon where all vertices touch the circumference of a sphere.
Okay.
I think that's the way somewhat like the way they describe its properties.
So did you learn that in first grade?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think I really understood any of that. I got into geometry later in life, and I was like, yeah, I want to learn a little bit more about the formal bullshit.
Right.
We were actually learning about that.
Okay. So like fourth grade. Okay. Do you remember when it was?
It's later.
Yeah.
Originally, you were just a square.
Mhm.
You learned basics.
Right.
Well, because that's how we've been led to believe our minds develop, is you got to introduce a basic concept, then a grander concept, then a grander concept, and then you find some way to tie all those together, but only incrementally. So that's the way we've been led to believe. One of the things would be that a cube is defined by all sides being equal, so they're all the same size, and they all meet on perpendicular planes, so 90-degree angles, and that's pretty much going to define a cube based on our observation of three-dimensional space.
Right.
Well, logic based on three-dimensional
space, right? Exactly.
So you brought up a really good point that from the vantage point that you're at, you can't see the whole cube.
But you can kind of imply that there's maybe something going on the other side.
Okay, so you're using physics and metaphysics.
Yes.
Because you don't see that other side of the cube, but you believe that it's still there, whether you can see it or not.
Based on logic.
Well, based on results that you've got so far, which is where logic comes from in the first place.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So how many sides of the cube can you see right now? How about you?
3.
Okay. How about you? Are you seeing the same 3 sides?
No.
How do you know that?
Through.
Different angles of observation.
So you're not over here, so I know you're not seeing what I'm seeing.
Exactly. And none of you are seeing what I'm seeing. I only see 2 sides of the cube.
Right.
And sometimes, when I'm looking at a cube, all I can see is one side, and it looks like a square.
And there's only one seer anyway.
So, as we get into that, I use the cube as a tool for communication. So, you see one side of the cube, 3 sides, you see 3, you see 3, I see 2. There's an opportunity for each of us to only see one, and it not even to be the same side. But if we can agree that it's a cube, or at least feel like it's a cube and that we can explore that, then we've got somewhere to start with. We've got the quantum probability matrix, we've got the common ground. What we tend to do is look at light and dark, like we talked about earlier. So I've hung this and we've got some overhead lights on. You can see that underneath there's a reflection. And the reflection, if you look at it, and feel free to get up and move around and so you can see it, the reflection kind of looks like a cube, or at least 3 sides of the cube. Now, because we've got the indirect light, we've got a couple of different shadows, so I'm going to cut the light out and just use a flashlight, a single light source. But it's the same principle. This light source is just like your eyes receiving that light back from whatever you're looking at. So instead of getting into duality, which is saying these are the only 3 sides of the cube that exist, and the other side doesn't exist, i.e., your point of view doesn't exist because it's not mine. If we can agree that we've got different points of view, we've got different perspectives, then we've got a tool for communication. We can all use opportunities to improve and develop communication. Right? It's useful. We use it in our everyday lives. So observe the cube there, and I'm sure this will be interesting on the recording. So the first thing I'm going to do is suspend the light source directly above the cube. And let's see. It's a little bit tighter space than the original suspension rig that I had. So virtually what I was going to do is so just with this, without any commentation from me, just observe what you observe. Feel free to get up, move around, share different points of view, and then we'll go ahead and have a discussion about it after everybody's had an opportunity. It's the theory that counts. Practice one's like, take a look at it. So you can see that the rig has its specific suspension, different angles. I've chosen to approach the light from the source that I have because, as we found out, the most sides of the cube that we can actually physically see at any one time are 3. You can't see the other side. And that's the most. You can see one side, or you can see 2 sides, or you can see 3 sides, but you can't see, just by looking, all 6. Right? So a 3-sided figure shows up. What else do you observe? Right? Because of how it's approaching, and because there's actually, if everybody wants to get up and just walk around it and just have an observation based on that.
So if we're able to rotate around it, then we can see the whole thing.
Right. In theory. But there's a dark side still. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So no matter how you rotate around at this angle, you can't see all of it.
And it's because of the barrier on the horizontal planes. We can't see
because the light's reflecting back.
Right. Oh, right.
Okay. So go ahead and just walk around, observe what you observe. Okay. Well, and that's the thing, is it implied in our minds that because it's a composition of squares, it should be square, or it should represent a cube somehow. Now, I'll let you know that I did this experiment before, and the figure that showed up looked more like a hexagon.
Yeah, well, they're dual to each other.
Right? But because of the way that I suspended this, the light had come at a slightly different angle, so the cube was actually making a different shot. So to demonstrate that, I've actually allowed this to swing a little bit. So here's this figure, and you can see the figure actually changes as it comes in and out of the light. This is also true of our ability to perceive. Sometimes we don't even see the cube. Sometimes the cube is the only thing we see. Sometimes we see an aspect, 1, 2, 3 sides of it. So this ability to perceive is wholly dependent on our ability to see. And seeing whether that's based in the physical side, the reflecting light, or the non-physical side. The sides that we can't see with the light that we still feel are there.
Plus, if you were a 2-dimensional being, we're 3-dimensional, kind of. you would think it was just a square.
Mm-hmm. So these oscillate at different frequencies, go back and forth. You get different results by moving the light source. Now you could either be the light source, you could be your own eyes right now receiving that light source, you could be the cube itself. You could be the dark side of the cube, the light side of the cube, only one of the sides of the cube. All these are possibilities if you allow them.
So vibration, as soon as something moves, there's differences in perspective.
Quantum observer principle.
And there's also duality, one versus the other. So if everything would just stop moving, then we would know peace.
We're just getting into free
And see, it's good that you bring up that. I'm going to go ahead and turn the light back on.
Yeah.
But does anybody have any other observations of what they were seeing, what was interacting, maybe what they were expecting to see? Now, if you look, with this direct light source and the indirect light sources, what shows up on the board? So these different, because they're different light sources, you get a bigger picture. Now, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's why I do these experiments, to observe, to reflect, to experience what happens when these things go on. Now, it's very clear with our conceptualization of shadows that this shadow, that shadow, that shadow forms into a cube. But before, you clearly saw it was a pyramid, right? And even when it gets into a different rotation, if you come to it from this angle, you can actually see outside here you've got a different shadow, a different figure. It's difficult to make out where the original light source was from.
Right.
So,
It's also octahedral.
Right.
It's hanging.
and again, it's chosen for the refractive perspective of it. So, brought up a topic I was going to into.
Oh, this idea that, movement. Anytime something's moving, your different perspectives are inherent. And duality is inherent when any object moves.
So, relativity.
Right.
Okay? So we've gone a bit beyond the scope of seeing, but this is where it's less.
Yeah.
So relativity says that an object's speed is relative to the distance and the speed of the observer. So a clock can appear to run slower on a moving train than it does just standing and looking at it, because of a bunch of different things. But the quantum observer principle says that simply by observing something, you change the outcome of it. And we've all got examples where that's happened because, for instance, we go to see a psychic or a tarot reader, and they say, this is going to happen. Well, as soon as they say this is going to happen, you have usually a dichotomy of responses to it. Either you want it to happen or you don't want it to happen. And based on whether you want it to happen or not, you make choices and decisions. Sometimes it happens anyways. A lot of times it does. And it was in the rebelling of it that you learn your lesson or don't, or in the embracing of it that you learn your lesson or don't. But all that is choice. So the reason that I bring this up is that this is one way to demonstrate. And I like cubes because a lot of times people don't readily think how many sides a cube has and how do you define a cube.
I never figured
Right?
it out. My first thought was 4, and I was like, no, it's
Yeah.
just a square.
Well, and that's a lot of like how many
Then I would
sides
double it.
or how many faces or whatever language. So then you wanted to double it. You wanted to have 8 sides. Not quite right. So the beauty of the cube is that it shows duality. But any geometric figure, even irregular ones, can show this principle of duality.
Right. Because there's up versus down, there's inside versus outside.
Well, light and dark. As simple as that. This experiment of light and dark, shadows and light, shows you that there's a duality to this. But let's look at judgment a little bit. Is light or dark better? You like the dark.
I go back and forth, but
Okay.
so yeah. it all
So you play
depends.
both. What about you? You like both. Some people only like light. They only want light in their lives. Some people only want dark in their lives. And if you put either one in either space, get that out of the space. For instance, when you're in dark, do you want bubbly, happy, joyful, people
I'm
in your
actually like
space?
scared of the dark.
Okay,
I can't have my toes hanging off the bed.
right?
I freak out over it.
Nice.
But I like it.
But you like
I
it.
like the dark.
Okay.
That's good.
So there's still a dichotomy for you because somebody said, let's go to that fly wants me to eat it. Somebody said that this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. A lot of those relationships have been established by people outside of us. So a big part of this experiment is to encourage you to explore what's within you and your relationships and your connections, because that's absolutely an important part of your experience.
I think what
Is-
you're,
What?
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, what you're doing that's so brilliant is like, first of all, when you take a look at your so-called darkness, you often find that it's what people characterize as light, or things that you identify as your light might actually be your darkness.
Right.
Like maybe people think that you're so kind and loving, and you are, and that is your light. However, it also means that you end up being a doormat or something like that. So there's a flip side, the shadow side to these so-called virtuous things. That's just one example. So I think what you're doing is just cool. Is you're helping move people into this non-dual awareness, which is a place where a lot more peace and less judgment.
Okay. And that's a big part of it, the judgments, the right versus wrong, the us versus them, the duality consciousness is absolutely necessary. I love duality consciousness. It gives so many lessons.
You have to have it for discernment and intelligence, right? That's kind of, it's built in.
Well, and you've got the non-physical rules, the physical rules. You've got all these different laws or operations that are going on at any time. Not in this first book, but in the second book will be the cubic conchai. So I expanded the cubic perception to use as a tool for a human, which is, the etymology, I'm sure you're well aware of the etymology of the word, but it's basically a compilation that makes this essence of who we are, which we all know. We all know that we're a compilation of different things. I am spirit, I am mind, I am body, I am all these things. But spirit, mind, and body are three-sided. The other three sides. So the abbreviation I use is Christ, very popular. You can use Buddha. I haven't figured out the acronyms yet, but so with Christ, one side of the cube is corporeal, or your body. With another side of the cube is heart, which emotion, feeling. Another side of the cube is reality. What's real? What's not real? What could be real? What can't be real? Another side is intellectual. I think, therefore I am. Another side of the cube is spiritual. This is my essence. This is who I am. And another one is tribal. And tribal is a bit abstract, but essentially it's part of
Group
part of
identity.
consciousness, group identity.
Yeah.
But it's who are you? Well, you're human. You can identify that. And it's the consciousness that goes with I'm human versus I'm plant, I'm animal, I'm stone, whatever. So that is one aspect of reality. Now the other fun part is this cube is assembled this way, but as we can all pretty much readily identify this as a Rubik's type cube, it's shiftable, it's changeable, different parts can be intermixed throughout. And as such, so can any one of you. Some of your bodily side may be in your spiritual side. This is new coming in, so bear with me. some of your spiritual side can be in your heart side, and some of your intellectual side can be in your body, especially with culture, which influences all those. So you can end up with a cube that's all different mix and match, but it's still you, it's still perfect. And if you want all those pieces to be on their own sides, you get to determine how that looks. Anybody here ever play with solve a Rubik's Cube before? Okay. Anybody here break a Rubik's Cube apart and put it back together the way they want it to?
I don't care that much.
Okay. Okay. So I played with a Rubik's Cube and it fell apart on me and I was disappointed. Then I realized how the Rubik's Cube is put together. So the basic thing is that there's a sphere inside that all this rotates around. And it's got its different joints and it connects to it, but there isn't actually a physical sphere there. This is awesome. I love that I've got it recording. This is the first time I've talked about this, so it's fun. So that sphere inside is, it's not physically there, but because of the interlocking joints, that's the axis of rotation that they spin around. That's how you can spin it all the way around and you can twist it this other way. But if you try to twist it the way it doesn't go, it'll come apart, or it won't go, or however it goes. So all of that's a very grand representation of who you are is unique. Your red and your blue side may not be on the same touching. Your yellow and blue side may not be touching. These kind of things. So what is yellow and blue energy associations? What are those different sides? So that's where cube conchite comes in, and you actually build your own cube and identify and make your relations with that. I feel like we're doing pretty good on time. With what we've gone over, is there any questions, any additions, any clarifications, or feedback? I love getting feedback. If something was too intellectual or too spiritual, I love getting that feedback firsthand so that I can shift it.
I was just thinking about this part of Christ, with those different sides, and I think to have a whole cube or to the whole, you really need to have a balance of all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Not focus on one thing because then you'll be off.
Right.
And then it'll be your resolution. That'll cause a problem.
And that was a big part of the reason why I had to get up and move around. So you could shift your perspective and realize that it was just a matter of choosing to get up and move around. Granted, I prompted you and rewarded you for getting up and moving around, which is really how life works. It'll prompt you and then it'll reward you for making the choice. But by doing that, you were able to see more of the reality that exists around you. And that's really what this experience is about, is this amazing floor and experiencing it barefooted or with shoes on or by rolling something across it or trying to run full speed or walk across it a different way, whatever you choose to do. And because you've had such a unique life, you're going to come up with something completely different. And sure, you can use some of the stuff that I've gone over, or stuff that you've been taught, or stuff that just comes to you, however it comes to you. I call it downloading. But use the tools that you've got, because there's people out there that are waiting for the insights that you come across every day. There's people that are literally they're thinking about ending their lives or causing harm to other people. Like Elise brought up, you either do things out of love or a call for love. And so, are you doing it out of love? Or are you doing it out of a call for love? And what does that mean for you? And how do you experience that? So, from Elise's class, you all have schedules of this month's events. We've got 33 classes per week for the whole month as a thank you for people coming in and spending time with us. We've got class review forms so that you can give us feedback. Stuff that you want to see more of. We've got a suggestion box out front there that encourages people to contribute their content and volunteer ideas and resources, because we're creating an awareness, an abundance economy that says we can do this. We have the resources. I mean, just what you brought with you today is enough to teach and flow, and people love giving people money for things that they enjoy using. And it's just that easy. So, is this all pretty clear? It's pretty sparse. I usually fill the whole board up. I had smaller.
But you could go with any one of these things. You could go off into something different.
Exactly, and that's where you get into abundance mentality. Now, the energy that you brought up, a bunch of different areas, sounded like it was daunting for you.
No, it's exciting because I see the potential for you to do this.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to benefit greatly from it.
Absolutely, and that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about not only benefiting me, because every time I talk about this, like we were doing here,
Yeah.
I know how Rubik's Cube works, but I never made the connection that could be a representation of who you are.
Right.
And expanding and flowing on that. So share content, embrace the energy and the connection of who we are, because that's what this whole space is about.
Yeah.
Is developing that consciousness and expanding it, and reaching out to the people that don't think that that's possible. And that's a big part of the whole message that we are here. But you're good. You all have the capacity to contribute, whatever way that looks, and work on your strengths. If your strength is physics, work in physics. If your strength is metaphysics, work in physics. If you're a shaman like me and you walk between worlds, then quantum probability matrix, the language in between the two tribes, or however it looks. Because it's valuable, it's needed, it's craved by the people around you. And then we've got it's up front. We've got a donation jar, and that's how we're actually keeping the place open. It is through donations, so if you are inspired to donate, we lovingly appreciate that. Donations also look like checking in and sharing your experience on Facebook. I love testimonials. People will come in and say, "This is so amazing, it's great," but they don't know what amazing is. So define your experience. Share with me what was amazing about it. What would you like to see more of? What can we expand on? And bring people in. That's another way to contribute the abundance. The more people that come in, the better off it is, because each of you had your own individual content that you contributed, your own unique perspective that allowed us to go in a direction that we couldn't have gone without you being here. So your friends, family members, this will be on YouTube. Share the experience with them, discuss it, do whatever you like. One of the things that I didn't do this time, it's perfect, and I release. I get into judgment sometimes, so I just let myself work through it. Is I actually typically will do an audio recording, so that you can just listen to the audio. Because some of these concepts, like the book, it's 19 pages with pictures, but some of the concepts are pretty broad, and that's the ideas. They're broad and expansive, and at first it may be like, oh, I got this, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute. And then the whole thing opens up, and you may have some ideas or judgments or feelings about that. So allow that and explore that and reflect on that. 27th is our official grand unveiling. It's going to be a huge shindig, so definitely bring people there. At least once 1,000 people there. So, every 100 people brings 10. We're good. And it's totally doable. We've got plenty of energy running through the space. But that's the scale that we're operating on. We believe in this message that much that we are open to outflowing it to that many people. And then this is the first one. Next week's, I'm actually crowdsourcing ideas. So, did you see the event on Facebook? Okay, so is that the email that you use for Facebook?
Yes.
Cool. So I'll friend you on Facebook, and then I'll include you in the event, and then you can not only get the video, but you'll also get like any updates or any discussions that come through that. And then I always crowdsource the topic. The very first one I present, so people can get an idea of how it flows, but I always crowdsource the topic. So, for instance, relationships are a big thing that you want to talk about. We'll talk about relationships. If communication or vulnerability comes up a lot, courage, trust, all these other different, seemingly large and unapproachable topics come up, it's fair game because we're going to go into it in an emotional and also an intellectual space, so it's safe. And we create the space. I create the space energetically. I maintain the space energetically, and I respond to the energy dynamics of the people that are there, so that you can get into that space of shame. It's good. There. Yeah. So, if you think of a topic tonight before you leave, or if you readily have a topic available, if nobody comes up with a topic, I put one together. I've got so much content, as you can see. Like Ryan noted, any one of these areas you can expand and explain on and have life stories on. So, ideally, I'd love to see this space packed. And people in a space of love and compassion and sharing, because they know that they can come here and experience the urban oasis, experience the sacredness of being within the city, and just let it flow.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Yes, thank you.
Namaste to you all. Any questions, feedback from?
I want to know, we talked about Q, and I think it was very insightful for illustrating certain concepts. But I want everybody to kind of give an emotional label to the Q. How does it make you feel? What's the word? One word.
Kind of a little bit can you guys grab it?
Destructive.
Destructive?
You've been in the lot.
Okay. Can you connect emotionally to it? Let go of it. I mean the stuff that we just talked about, but like emotionally. Structure.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Solid, I think.
And destructive, you want to change it and manipulate it?
It's too QE.
Too static.
That's walking in on the class, not knowing this stuff.
No.
Well,
I love getting people's emotional impressions on like numbers, because people don't think of numbers or geometry as being like soulful or anything like that, but I do, and so I experience them first emotionally, and then through that I often have some I'll like research the intellectual stuff, and sometimes I like it, but most of the time it bores me. But it's crazy to me that numbers have emotional appeal to people. So do shapes.
Well, and numerology is another thing that I study. 6 is relationships. 3 is it's actually gone beyond duality and into wholeness, or the experience of wholeness. Then 1 is new beginnings, 2 is the duality, 4 is foundations. People think of a firm foundation, it's square, it's rigid, it's powerful. And then 5 is freedom. So that's the 1 through 6 of the cube. Then you've got 7, which is exploration, 8, which is abundance, 9, which is spirituality, ending of cycles, that kind of stuff. Master numbers 11 is enlightenment, 22 is master builder, and 33 is architect.
Right.
And each of those has an infinitely expanded capacity. But those are the readily recognized values of those numbers. Your own life experiences will yield different results for those numbers. Pythagoras, who developed the base 10 number system, actually concentrated on the essences of the numbers and then assigned the value to them. This is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3.
And I think there's wisdom in that, like, the monad was the number 1, and it was the essence of unity, and it makes sense, right? And number 2 he called duad, and it was the essence of division, and that's where we get the word diablo, which is the devil, or that which divides. And then, the 3 he called the triad, and it was the unification of the 1 and the 2. And so they're super duper simple, but it's based on like archetypes that are eternal and intuitive, and they'll absolutely never change because they're built into
Who we are.
the very essence of creating something out of nothing.
On the road building.
Yeah.
Ta-da. Cool. I really appreciate all of you being here. I love the feedback and the attentiveness. Tune into our other classes.